Young and the Restless spoilers. Full episodes. Many people thought Noah was out of his mind, blinded by love for Sienna, but no, he was the most level-headed and wise man, and he realized Sienna had changed, exhibiting many suspicious behaviors. And then there was Sienna. Sienna always tried to appear as the woman who loved and cared for Noah the most, but she only wanted to get close to him and exploit his secrets, nothing more. She knew how to talk to him, how to reassure him, how to make him believe, even if only for a moment, that not everything in his world was built on lies. But now when Noah looked at her, something was wrong. It wasn't something he could easily explain, and perhaps it was what worried him most. There was a subtle hesitation in her eyes when certain topics were brought up, a slight delay before she answered, as if she were carefully considering each word. The information Matt knew was correct, and it seemed he had a listening device to monitor the Numna family. Everything had happened so unexpectedly, and now there was a price to pay. Noah and Sienna would have a vengeful battle, a close confidant, someone who could understand Noah's thoughts, plans, and even his weaknesses. And when Noah allowed himself to arrive at that conclusion, only one name made sense, no matter how much he resisted. The moment the truth began to take shape in his mind, Noah felt something inside him shatter. It wasn't just anger. It was betrayal, pain, and overwhelming shock mixed with the shattered realization that he had been blind, that he had allowed someone to stand beside him while silently tearing him apart from the inside. At first, he didn't confront her verbally. There was no calm conversation, no careful questioning. Instead, there was a sudden shift in his demeanor, a cold determination replacing any trust that had once existed. Noah's bloodshot eyes terrified Sienna. He began to tighten his grip on her, subduing her. Sienna's eyes widened in shock, her body tensing as she tried to pull away, but Noah wouldn't let go. His hands searched frantically, ignoring her protests, ignoring the confusion in her voice, and then he found it. A small device. Almost insignificant in appearance, easily overlooked if you weren't paying attention. Noah saw it and knew what it was. Why did Sienna have this? What was it for? For a moment, everything was silent. Noah stared at the device, his mind reeling, trying to process the reality that had just been laid before him. And then the anger returned stronger than before, surging within him with an uncontrollable force. He looked at Sienna, this time truly at her, not as someone he cared about, but as someone who had deceived him, manipulated him, exploited him. What is this? The question didn't need to be spoken aloud. It was evident on his face, in the tension of his body, in the way his hands trembled slightly, not from fear but from trying to restrain himself. But he couldn't restrain himself any longer. His hand moved to her throat before he realized what he was doing. It wasn't a calculated act. It wasn't a planned act. It was instinct driven by rage and betrayal. Sienna gasped, her hands instantly reaching up to try and pry his hand away, her composure shattering as fear overwhelmed her. For the first time, she was no longer the calm, controlled woman Noah had always known. She was terrified. Truly terrified. And in that moment, Noah didn't see the woman he thought he loved. He saw a liar, a spy, someone who had stood by him, not out of loyalty, but out of obligation to someone else. Sienna couldn't bear it any longer. The fear in her eyes deepened, her resistance weakened as she realized there was no escape, no way to lie anymore. The truth wasn't uttered as a carefully orchestrated confession, but something forced out, pulled under pressure, each word heavier than the last. She had admitted it. She admitted that she had never truly cared for him, that everything she had done, every moment they shared, was part of a larger plan. She was there to gather information, to report back, to ensure Matt was always one step ahead. Each word struck Noah harder than the last. By the time she finished speaking, the last vestiges of his restraint had vanished, replaced by something colder, more controlled, yet no less dangerous. He released her, but not out of pity. It was a calculated decision, a shift from momentary rage to something more deliberate. Sienna slumped slightly, coughing and choking, struggling to regain her breath, her whole body trembling as she realized her true predicament. But Noah didn't look at her with compassion. His face held no trace of tenderness. He had made his decision. The heavy reinforced steel of the door slid shut with a resounding metallic thud that echoed through the subterranean corridor of the Newman ranch. Noah Newman stood perfectly still, his hand resting on the cold brass of the deadbolt. He turned the lock until it clicked a sound that felt terrifyingly final. On the other side of that thick, soundproof barrier was Sienna. For weeks she had been a fixture in their lives, a trusted confidant, a seemingly indispensable ally who had woven her way into the very fabric of the Newman family's inner circle. But the flash drive burning a hole in Noah's pocket told a distinctly different story. It was a story of corporate espionage, of calculated deceit, and of a betrayal so deep it made Noah's blood run cold. He had lured her down into this windowless, climate-controlled vault, a relic of his grandfather Victor's more paranoid architectural endeavors under the guise of securing sensitive Newman Enterprises documents. Now it was her prison. Through the small, reinforced glass pane in the door, Noah watched Sienna's facade completely disintegrate. Her hands slammed against the glass, her mouth moving frantically as she shouted protests and pleas that were entirely muted by the soundproofing. Her wide, desperate eyes met his begging for an explanation, feigning innocence to the bitter end, but Noah's expression remained an impenetrable mask of stone. He had learned from the best. He was channeling every ounce of Victor Newman's legendary ruthlessness. He didn't need to hear her lies anymore. He had the decrypted emails. He had the offshore bank routing numbers. He knew exactly what she was preparing to do, and more importantly, he knew exactly who she was working for. Noah pulled his smartphone from his jacket, his thumb hovering over the screen. The truth was a heavy burden, and he could not carry it alone for another second. He needed to make the call. He needed to reach his father and his uncle. 2,000 miles away, the neon-drenched skyline of Las Vegas bled through the slatted blinds of a penthouse suite at the Mirage. The air conditioning hummed aggressively, battling the relentless Nevada heat, but the atmosphere inside the room was stifling for an entirely different reason. Nick Newman paced the length of the Persian rug, his jaw clenched so tightly it ached. His sleeves were rolled up, his tie discarded somewhere on the velvet sofa. Across the room, Adam Newman stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, a glass of bourbon resting loosely in his grip. His dark eyes scanned the glittering strip below, searching for a ghost. They were hunting Matt. For days, the brothers had been chasing shadows, following a breadcrumb trail of whispered rumors and burner phone pings that had led them to the desert. Matt was a phantom, a man who had systematically targeted the Newman empire with a precision that was both infuriating and terrifying. Every time Nick and Adam thought they had him cornered, Matt slipped through their fingers, seemingly always one step ahead of their every move. It was as if he could read their minds. Nick stopped pacing and ran a hand through his hair, exhaling a sharp breath. "This doesn't make any sense, Adam. The meet was supposed to happen 2 hours ago." The informant swore Matt would be at the Bellagio tables. "We had the exits covered. We had the floor surveilled. Nothing. It's like the guy evaporated into thin air." Adam took a slow sip of his bourbon, the ice clinking softly against the crystal. "He didn't evaporate," Nick Adams said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "He was tipped off. I told you from the beginning this felt too clean. Matt is playing a game of chess, and we're out here moving checkers. He knew we were coming." How could he know? Nick shot back, his frustration boiling over. "The only people who knew about this Vegas trip are the people in our absolute inner circle, the family, the top-tier security at Newman. Nobody else." Before Adam could offer a cynical retort about the illusion of loyalty, Nick's phone shattered the tense silence. It vibrated violently against the glass coffee table. Nick crossed the room in 2 long strides and snatched it up. The caller ID flashed Times Noah asterisk. Nick swiped the screen to answer, putting the phone on speaker and tossing it back onto the table so Adam could hear. "Noah, tell me you have something good, because we are drowning in dead ends out here." Dad Noah's voice crackled through the speaker. It wasn't the voice of the easygoing artist Nick knew. It was tight, strained, and laced with an icy edge that immediately commanded the room's attention. "I have something. But it's not good. It's a nightmare." Adam turned away from the window, setting his drink down on the sill. The shift in his demeanor was instantaneous. The predator had caught a scent. "What did you find, Noah?" Adam asked, stepping closer to the phone. "It's Sienna Noah," stated bluntly, the words dropping like a lead weight into the center of the Vegas suite. Nick blinked his mind, struggling to process the name. Sienna. What about her? Is she okay? Did Matt get to her? "Matt didn't get to her, Dad. She times his times." Matt's Noah corrected, his voice trembling slightly with suppressed rage. "I just locked her in the sub-basement vault at the ranch. I spent the last 12 hours digging into the encrypted servers after the firewall tripped yesterday. I traced the unauthorized data packets. They were coming from her terminal. Sienna is the mole." A heavy, suffocating silence descended upon the penthouse. Nick stared at the phone, the color draining from his face. Sienna, the woman who had sat in on their most confidential strategy meetings. The woman who had pored over the financial restructuring plans. The woman who had smiled at him, asked about his children, and handed him the very itineraries for this Las Vegas pursuit. The betrayal hit Nick like a physical blow to the sternum. "Are you absolutely certain?" Noah Nick demanded, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "You cannot make an accusation like that unless you have ironclad proof." "I have the proof, Dad," Noah replied, his tone unwavering. "I have offshore transaction logs linking her directly to shell companies we know Matt controls. But worse than that, I have the outbound communication logs. She's been feeding him everything. Our security protocols, our financial weak points, and..." Noah paused, taking a deep breath. "She gave him your entire itinerary for Vegas. She told him about the informant. She told him exactly where you and Adam were going to be tonight. Adam let out a dark, humorless chuckle that sent a chill down Nick's spine. Well, Adam murmured, his eyes flashing with a dangerous predatory light. That explains why the ghost never showed up to the party. Nick felt a surge of pure, unadulterated fury. He slammed his fist down on the back of the sofa, the leather groaning under the impact. "Son of a bitch!" Nick roared. "She was right there. She was sitting at the table with us while we mapped this out. She looked me dead in the eye and wished us luck." "She played us, Dad," Noah said softly. "She played all of us. I'm looking at her through the glass right now. She knows it's over. But the damage is already done." The revelation completely shattered the paradigm of their mission. The pieces of the puzzle that had been scattered and confusing suddenly snapped together to form a horrifying picture. Matt didn't have supernatural intuition. He had a direct pipeline into the Newman family's brain trust. He had been holding a mirror up to their playbook, anticipating their strikes and casually stepping out of the way before the blow could land. Adam began to pace his mind, shifting gears with terrifying speed. This was his territory. Before he had donned the respectable suits of Newman Media, Adam had lived in the shadows. He understood the criminal underworld, the mechanics of espionage, and the psychology of a rat better than anyone else in the family. "Noah, listen to me very carefully," Adam said, leaning over the phone, his voice sharp and authoritative. "Do not let her out of that room. Do not speak to her. Do not let her make a phone call, not even to a lawyer. She is entirely cut off from the outside world as of this second. Do you understand?" "I understand, Adam. She's sealed in." "Good," Adam continued, his mind racing. "Now I need you to think. If Sienna was embedded this deeply, she didn't do it by accident. This wasn't a crime of opportunity. Matt planted her, which means we have a massive catastrophic breach of protocol." Nick looked at his brother, the anger giving way to a sickening realization. Adam's right. If she had access to the Vegas plans, she has access to everything. The Newman Enterprises mainframe, the ranch security codes, Victor's personal schedules. "It's worse than that, Nick," Adam interrupted, holding up a hand. He looked at his brother, his expression deadly serious. "Think about the logistics. A spy like Sienna doesn't operate in a vacuum. Matt is cautious. He's meticulous. If he went through the trouble of planting a high-level operative inside Newman, he wouldn't put all his eggs in one basket. One spy is a vulnerability. Two is an insurance policy." Noah's voice came through the speaker laced with new anxiety. "You think there are others. You think there's another mole." "I don't just think it, Noah. I'd bet my life on it," Adam stated, his paranoia honed by years of survival in the dark corners of Genoa City flaring to life. Sienna was the golden goose. She got the top-tier intel. But who let her in the door? Who vetted her background checks? Who bypassed the secondary security clearances to get her terminal access to the executive servers? Someone had to grease the wheels for her. She has a handler or an accomplice still walking the halls of Newman Enterprises. Nick felt the room spin slightly. The scope of the threat was expanding exponentially. It wasn't just Matt out in the desert. The rot was inside their own house. "If there's another spy," Nick said, his voice grim, "then everything we say, everything we do might still be monitored. We don't know who we can trust." "We trust no one," Adam declared flatly, "except the three of us. As of this moment, the circle is closed." "What do we do about Matt?" Nick asked, gesturing toward the window and the sprawling city beyond. "He's out there. He knows we're here. He knows we're blind." "Vegas is a burned asset," Adam said, dismissing the entire city with a wave of his hand. "We are sitting ducks in this penthouse. Matt knows our location, he knows our security detail, and now that Sienna has gone dark, he's going to know we've caught on. If we stay here, we're either going to be chasing our own tails or we're going to walk straight into an ambush." Nick nodded slowly, the strategic reality setting in. The hunter had become the hunted. They had to flip the board. "We need to get back to Genoa City, tonight." "Exactly," Adam agreed. "We pack up right now. We head straight to the private airfield. Do not use the standard Newman jet protocols. I'll call my own pilot, use a dummy flight plan. We drop off the radar completely." Nick leaned closer to the phone. "Noah, we are wheels up in 30 minutes. We'll be in Genoa City before dawn. Keep Sienna in the dark, literally and figuratively. Let the isolation work on her nerves. By the time we get back, I want her desperate to make a deal." "What's the play when you get here?" Noah asked. "We break her," Adam said, the words chillingly devoid of emotion. "She is the only thread we have left that connects to Matt. We tear her apart until she gives up his location, his endgame, and the name of every other rat hiding in our walls. We also have to formulate a new plan for Matt." Nick added, his mind already working on the counteroffensive. "He thinks he has us on the run. He thinks he's neutralized the Newman family. We use that arrogance against him. We let him think. Sienna is still operational for a little while longer. We feed him bad intel. We set a trap of our own. First things first, Adam said, grabbing his suit jacket from the back of a chair. We secure the perimeter at home. We cut out the cancer. Then we go to war. I'll be waiting for you at the ranch, Noah said. Be careful. If Matt knows Sienna is compromised, he might try to intercept you. Let him try, Nick growled, a fierce protective fire igniting in his chest. I'll see you soon, Noah. Nick ended the call. The silence returned to the suite, but the energy had shifted entirely. The frustrating stagnation of the past few days was gone, replaced by a dark, adrenaline-fueled purpose. Adam walked over to the minibar, pouring the remainder of his bourbon down the sink. He didn't need the alcohol. His mind was razor-sharp, calculating the countless variables of the impending conflict. He looked at Nick, seeing the same hardened resolve in his brother's eyes. They had spent years fighting each other, tearing the Newman family apart from the inside over petty grievances and power struggles. But nothing unified them quite like an external threat. And Matt had just crossed a line from which there was no return. He hadn't just attacked their business, he had violated the sanctity of their family. Get your things, Nick said, grabbing his tie and shoving it into his pocket. We have a rat to catch. And a ghost to kill, Adam replied softly. Without another word, the two brothers moved through the suite, gathering their belongings with military efficiency. The neon lights of Las Vegas continued to flash outside the window, a city of illusions and broken promises. But Nick and Adam Newman were no longer interested in the game. They were heading home to Genoa City, and they were bringing hell with them. Thousands of miles away in the cold, silent depths of the Newman ranch, Noah stood outside the vault door. He watched Sienna through the glass. She had stopped screaming. She was sitting on the floor, now her knees pulled to her chest, rocking slightly as the reality of her situation set in. She had flown too close to the sun. She had underestimated the ruthless machinery of the family she had tried to dismantle. Noah turned away from the door, the heavy silence of the corridor wrapping around him. The board was set. The pieces were moving. The battle for the soul of Newman Enterprises had officially begun, and there would be no mercy for those caught in the crossfire.